ready. We have everybody here now.
What time is it?
Okay, that's not terrible. All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. We do have public comment on our agenda. We have a couple guests. Are there any guests that would like to make a public comment? Okie dokie.
What about anybody online, Madam Chair?
Oh, yeah. Is there anyone online that would like to make a public comment? We have lots of people online. This is very exciting. Not seeing any hands.
Can you read those?
I can kind of read those. Yeah.
You want me to move you closer? All right.
Can't see.
Next up is approval of the agenda. Is there anything that anybody would like to have add or removed from the agenda? If not, entertain a motion to approve it.
I move that we approve. Second.
Okay, everyone in favor of approving the agenda? Say aye. Any nays? Next up is the approval of the minutes. They were in our packet that we got and they are in the printout that you have. If there's anything that we need to adjust to the minutes or a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from September 16th? Say aye. Any nays? Y'all, September 16th feels like a lifetime ago. Okay, now that that's all taken care of, new business, 2025 annual meeting calendar. What in here? Oh, there it is. I missed it, sorry. Okay, so these are the dates that we have scheduled for the committee to meet. We'll continue with the third Monday of each month at 4 p.m.
Here at City Hall.
here at City Hall.
Are we intending on 12 meetings in 2025? No.
Probably not. Maybe, but probably not.
Okay.
It depends on if the city council decides to extend the work of the committee beyond the plan. And Madam Chair, also, if we could, what date is the third Monday for December? If we could amend the regular meeting schedule for this year also.
Okay.
To change the place of meeting for here, because it's on the schedule as city ops, and we will not be down there for city ops.
Okay. What date is that gonna
Two
be?
separate motions.
That day is.
16. This is Easter Monday. Just throw these out there. Just for-
Okay, let's go ahead and change the meeting for December, and then we come back to this calendar. Do we need to change the location of our December meeting, which you said was what date? Sorry.
Yes, amend the regular meeting schedule for 2024 for the December 16th meeting.
Okay.
Change it to here instead of city ops.
Is everybody gonna be okay with changing that location? All right, all those in favor of changing the location for our December 16th meeting to here instead of city ops, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, we fixed that. Okay, it has been brought to my attention that March 17th is the Monday of spring break for Henderson County Public Schools. So we may want to look at changing that one. And then also April 21st is the Monday after Easter.
Also, the 20th of January is Martin Luther King Day.
Safe stuff.
And I would guess that City Hall is closed on that day, isn't it?
Yeah. Should we bring this back at the December meeting?
I think we should. With Patch Connie.
What do you wanna do about the March and April meeting and change them to if they're falling on,
The 17th is President's Day in February.
yeah, we don't,
It just,
We don't,
it's just, we don't observe that.
we don't observe that.
what we do.
It seems
Let us talk with the city manager and we'll bring it
Come up with
back.
some suggestions.
Yes,
Okay.
because, before, there might be other things that would conflict if we moved it ahead or back a week, so we need to check that.
Yeah, yep. Cause I know it would conflict with tree board, but only a little bit if we move it to the second Monday, second Monday.
Okay. All right, we'll bring it back in December.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, so that will be coming back to us at our December meeting. All right, next up under new business is our presentation of housing needs assessment. This is very exciting.
So, Madam Chair, as you'll recall, we have contacted with DFI at the School of Government to perform a needs assessment and then to identify some sites for potential housing projects. And we have with us Frank Maraca and Sarah Odio from DFI, and they have completed the needs assessment work. And so they're gonna present and tell the committee in pretty much a lot of detail today about what their findings are, and then they'll be presenting to city council at the December meeting at a more bird's eye view, but anyway.
Great. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Great to see everyone. My name is Frank Maraca. I'm an assistant director with DFI, the Development Finance Initiative, and I'm joined this evening with my colleague Sarah Odio, who's also on the line. I'm going to talk a little bit just about our work and our mission and what we're going to be working with the city or the work that we've already done with the city over the past few months and kind of where we're going. And then as Angie said, I'll jump into a pretty in-depth conversation about the housing needs and the housing market, both within the city and in the area, and how this information can help inform some of the next steps you all are looking at for identifying sites for affordable housing. I want to give you just a little bit of background about us and the School of Government. I know many of you were on the trip out to Chapel Hill earlier this year, but just a little bit of a refresher, the School of Government provides advice and technical training to local governments all over North Carolina. Within the school, DFI is a program that partners with local governments on public-private partnerships for real estate development. We've actually worked with the city before a few years ago on a gray mill in downtown and assessing what are the feasible paths for redevelopment of that site and working with a private developer for revitalizing the mill. Over the past 5 years or so, we've been really responsive to the growing needs of affordable housing across all communities in North Carolina, and helping North Carolina communities work with the private sector to attract investment in affordable housing. And that's the work that we've been engaged with the city that we kicked off in August, really starting with what's called an opportunity site identification. An op site ID is a process of going through and identifying sites within the community that have a feasible path towards development of affordable units. And we look at feasibility through a few different lenses. We look at it through the site itself, through the actual parcels and what is possible on the site. So looking at the density that could be achieved on the site, looking at things like topography, environmental conditions. We look at the housing market. So the bulk of what we're going to be talking about today, can the site meet the specific housing market needs within the community? Later in our process, early next year, we'll dive into the financial analysis of these sites. So how much will it cost to actually develop the types of housing that the city hopes to see on these sites? And most importantly, what is the potential gap funding required to realize those projects? And then this fourth lens is ensuring that these sites also actually meet the housing priorities of the community. So if the city wants to build housing that is geared more towards families or older households, can the sites that we're looking at actually support those types of developments? In addition to a lot of data that we're going to be showing you all today, we also, prior to the hurricane, were involved in a lot of stakeholder engagement. Hendersonville, I know, is very unique in that you all have a ton, a lot of housing partners at the table, and we've been very fortunate to learn a lot about the city through these partners. So this is just a list of some of those folks who we were able to engage with before, of course, the disruption from the hurricane. And I know that you all as well, the city as well, has been working on creating or setting up listening sessions to help inform the housing priorities going forward. So I'm going to start with a high-level summary of the housing needs and the market for the city, and then I'm dive into each of these pieces more in detail. Countywide, to meet current unmet demand as well as future growth, Henderson County needs an estimated 10,000 new housing units over the next 5 years. We'll dive into where that number comes from, where that 10,000 number comes from. But to get a little bit more specific to the city, at least 2,000 of these units are needed within the city of Hendersonville for low to moderate income households. Before the hurricane, Hendersonville's housing supply was already constrained. Over the past decade, household growth in the city outpaced new construction by about 2 to 1. And the vacancy rates for both rental units and for sale units is below 2%. We'll talk about the different household types within the city that have housing needs. There's a wide range of those, ranging from families, early career individuals, and older households that live in either unaffordable or low quality housing. And 80% of the households in need within the city are low to moderate income. And then finally, I reserved a little bit of time at the end to talk about some of the ways that some of the early estimates of how the hurricane impacted the supply of housing, both within the region and the city. According to some state estimates, about 126,000 housing units were damaged in the hurricane across Western North Carolina. And within the city, the lowest income neighborhoods had the greatest exposures to flood hazards prior to the hurricane. I'm going to start with a little bit of context, a little bit of regional context and where Hendersonville sits within some of the growth that Western North Carolina is seeing. Henderson County is unique from a lot of its neighbors. This chart shows the change in population over the past 20 years. And while Henderson County hasn't seen the same growth as Buncombe County to the north, it really stands out from a lot of its neighbors like Haywood, Transylvania, Rutherford, and Polk, in that Henderson County really is seeing a significant amount of growth compared to these other Western North Carolina communities. Folks move to Henderson County both within North Carolina, but also all over the country. In recent years, about 40% of households moving to the county are from out of state. A lot of folks, as you all probably know, being on the ground from as far places as California, Florida, and New York. New households moving to Henderson County have pretty different incomes, in that households moving from these out-of-state communities, the average income of these households in 2022 was about $120,000 adjusted for inflation. Meanwhile, households moving from in-state, from within North Carolina, have average household incomes of around $80,000. One of the big themes that we saw in the data, as well as our stakeholder conversations, was that a lot of this growth in Hendersonville specifically is really being driven by recent retirees and folks moving to the area after retirement. About 45% of households within the city are over the age of 65, so nearly half. Compared to the statewide share is about 26%, so nearly twice the share of households in the city are over 65 years old. This is a trend that we've seen has really accelerated over the past decade. This chart shows the number of households by different age brackets about 10 years ago in 2012. And even in 2012, the largest age bracket within the city was those who are 75 and over. 10 years later, we've seen that trend accelerate, and that there are that 75 and over age bracket is still the largest household group within the city, and as well as significant growth among the 65 to 75-year-old households. So I just want to start out with a little bit of context about where Hendersonville sits within Western North Carolina. I'm going to shift now to what are the housing needs of folks living within the city. I want to start with a little bit of definition setting. These are some charts and terms this group is probably already familiar with, but just to refresh ourselves of who is low income within Hendersonville. Low income households or housing programs look at households as a percentage of the area median income, or AMI. And differentiates those thresholds depending on the household size or the number of people who are within a household. Low-income households in the city of Hendersonville are those who make 80% of the area median income or less. So if I talk about LMI households, I'm really referring to folks who are making between $52,000 as a one-person household up to about $75,000 as a four-person household. And we can think about affordable housing costs in the same way. A studio apartment that's affordable at this 80% AMI bracket has those housing costs are about $1,300 up to a three-bedroom unit. The three-bedroom unit affordable to 80% AMI is around $2,000. Obviously, that's kind of the upper end for LMI households. And if we want to say that households are more deeply affordable or affordable to lower income brackets, we would say they're affordable maybe to 50% AMI or 30% AMI, and those rents are here on this table as well. I talked a little bit about housing need, and those are folks who either live in unaffordable or low quality housing. And we want to look at both of these categories. So a household could be in need of more affordable housing if they spend more than 30% of their annual income on housing related expenses, like not just rent, but also utilities, and for homeowners, mortgage payments plus insurance and utilities. But a household could also have need, even if they live in an affordable unit. If they live in a poor quality or overcrowded unit, we would count them as among households with need as well. So we look at both of these criteria when assessing who has need within the city of Hendersonville. Based off of those most recent data, at least 2,000 renters and 600 homeowners have housing need within the city. This chart breaks down the homeowners in blue and renters in orange, and breaks out each of those groups by those AMI brackets that I referenced earlier. And what stands out in the data that we see in a lot of communities is that a vast majority, over 80% of the households in need make less than 80% of the area median income. So most of the folks who have housing need, who are burdened by the cost of housing or live in low quality units, are considered low to moderate income households.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please jump in. Yep.
Do you guys have the data in that number of, out of those numbers, how many of those numbers are elderly or disabled?
You set me up perfectly for the next slide. Perfect. Yes. Yeah. So I wanted to dive into who are these households? So, who are these folks at these different income brackets, or the households with need within the city? And we have kind of four main categories in the data. These are individuals and families in the dark blue and blue who are over the age of 62. As well as younger individuals and living alone, or families who are younger than 62. And if we look at those households with need, looking first at the homeowners, the majority, about 2/3 of those households, of those homeowners with needs, are single folks over the age of 62 living alone. And this was also a big theme that we heard about in stakeholder conversations. Older individuals aging in place really were the most significant group among homeowners with housing needs. Among renters, there were various household types with needs. So you had those same individuals living alone over 62, but you also had younger folks living alone, as well as families as well, who made up who were shown in that group. And I'll spend a little bit of time diving a little bit more into each of these groups. So individuals over 62, there are about 825 households with housing needs within the city of Hendersonville. And something that we saw in the data and in our stakeholder conversations was that the older cohorts within the city were really split into two groups. You had those recent retirees who I talked about earlier, who are higher income, who are maybe moving from out of state or elsewhere in North Carolina, and who are making over $100,000. But they're over a third of the city's households over 65 actually make $30,000 or less. So these are extremely low income households among the older population. I want to emphasize here that income here includes not just earnings from employment or a job, but also includes Social Security payments, retirement income, forms of public assistance, or any type of income that a household could receive. Shifting gears a little bit to another one of those groups, families who are younger than 62. About 550 households within younger families within the city have housing needs. Something that we heard in our conversations was that in addition to housing costs, there were many other strains on families' budgets that contributed to challenges with housing affordability. One of them being childcare costs. So in addition to high cost of rent and mortgage or utilities, childcare costs was another strain on families' budgets. The average cost of childcare within the county makes up about a fourth of the monthly budget for a household earning 50% AMI or $42,000 a year. Something else I want to focus in on, I know this group in particular has been really interested in the community land trust model and creating more opportunities for low-income families or individuals to transition to homeownership. And this was something else that played out a lot in the data, and that there are significant challenges for low-income families to transition to homeownership within the city. This chart here shows the minimum income needed to afford the median priced home within the city, adjusted for inflation. And about 10 years ago, a family making $40,000 a year could afford the median priced home on the market. But in response to rising housing prices themselves, but also changes in the interest rate environment, that same a household has to make $120,000 a year to afford the median home price within the city. The last group, individuals who are younger than 62, was the last major group who had housing needs within the city. There are about 500 of these households, and this was something that we heard a lot when we were talking to employers, and that a lot of that housing and the lack of affordable housing was impacting a lot of companies' ability to attract workers from outside of the area. Obviously, with a growing retirement community, you have significant job growth in healthcare industry. When we spoke to folks from the UNC or from the Pardee hospital system, they talked extensively about the role of housing and their ability to attract and retain talent. We also heard that from manufacturing companies as well as the Henderson County school system. I'm going to pause there for a moment. Dropped a lot of information on you all so far. Any questions or reactions to some of that information I've shared about housing needs within the city?
Benny got anything?
I think the interesting point is the growth in the 31 to, I don't know what the other bracket was, 42-year-olds.
Yeah, 35 to 44, I noticed that too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
It almost
I think
doubled.
it's very positive.
Growth in that family age bracket as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Which I think is good. It's also concerning when we get to the other numbers that say the biggest sector jobs are only 80% of it.
Mhm.
Can't buy a house unless you're making $120,000 a year. There's definitely things that are not aligning.
Yeah. Something
Yeah,
that we
that's
heard
the
in
only one
our
that noticed that.
Yeah, something that we heard in our interviews with employers was that if they have an early career employee who gets married and moves into that home buying age, that usually they move out of the area to buy that house. They'll move to places
Mhm.
like Polk County or Spartanburg, because the opportunities for home ownership are so limited within the city.
Yep.
Right.
Did you state, excuse me, did you state the median home price? Did I miss that? How much did you have for the median home price?
The median home price is about $400,000. I will actually get to specifically like what's going on with home prices in the supply section. But no, I haven't gotten to that part yet. Great. So I'll talk a little bit now about the Hendersonville's housing supply, or kind of what the experience is like for these low-income households to find housing in the area. I want to revisit that first point that I made in the summary, looking at overall demand for housing within the region. As I said, Henderson County has demand for nearly 10,000 housing units over the next 5 years. And I want to break down that number a little bit more. About 3,000 of those units are from current unmet demand based off of recent household growth. So as I said at the beginning, Henderson County has been growing significantly compared to a lot of its neighbors, and construction or the supply of housing hasn't kept up. But if we expect recent household growth to continue into the future, there will be an additional demand for about 7,000 units over the next 5 years. And this future demand comes from two places. It's not just folks who are moving to the region or to the county, but also comes from household formation. So folks who might, or maybe growing up within Hendersonville, go to college, or younger folks living with their families who are also looking for housing. So household growth can come from both of these sources. Together, this makes up about 10,000 units of demand over the next 5 years. And wanted to reemphasize that number from the previous slide looking at housing needs. There's a need for at least 2,200 units that are affordable to that LMI households within the city. So zooming into the city itself, before we were looking at the market for the county, now let's talk about the city. New construction hasn't kept up with recent household growth. This chart here compares the number of households living in the city in blue compared with the number of housing units in orange. And since 2012, the number of housing units has increased by about 20%, while the number of households has increased by 40%, so nearly twice as quickly. Now you might be looking at this and seeing, well, we still have enough housing units for the number of households in our community, so what's really the challenge? But Hendersonville and the county are a little bit unique in that it's not just folks who are living here who are buying houses or where demand for housing comes from. You also have folks who buy second homes or homes that are used for short-term rentals like Airbnb and VRBO. So demand for housing comes from other places than folks who are just living here. I want to talk a little bit more about that short-term rentals. Short-term rentals make up about 5% of the city's housing stock and has increased slightly over the past few years since 2021. While I was talking before about the number of housing units compared to the number of households, and because supply has not kept up with household growth, what we've seen is that the vacancy rate, or the number of units that are for rent or for sale on the market, has really declined over the same time period. So here in orange, this is showing the vacancy rate for rental units, and that only 2% of housing units are vacant and available for rent. And on the for sale side, less than 1% of housing units in the city are vacant and for sale. In general, we say that a housing market has a healthy supply of housing if the vacancy rate is at around 7%. So that we use that 7% threshold to say there's enough supply on the market for things like turnover or household formation or someone moving to the area for a job, that when they're out looking for units, there's enough units available for rent or for sale on the market.
Hey Frank, this is John Conant.
Yep.
Question for you. Where you've done other studies in North Carolina like this, are there just out of comparison, what are other markets seeing regarding this supply? Is most of North Carolina below that 7%, or how do we relate to other places? Just curiosity as it relates to North Carolina in general.
Yeah, no, great question. So I would say many North Carolina communities are seeing trends just like this, where the vacancy rate has been declining pretty consistently over the past decade, and that supply really hasn't kept up with demand. That being said, there are a couple of pockets where in North Carolina where we've seen the vacancy rate increase to in some cases over 10%, and those are really in places like downtown Raleigh and Charlotte, where there's been so much construction over the past few years, a really historic level of new construction, that vacancy rate has really increased. In many of those markets, while affordability is certainly still a big challenge, the pace of rent increase or the cost of housing has moderated over the past couple years.
Thank you.
Yeah. So supply not keeping up with demand, vacancy rates decreasing. These are really the factors that contribute to the rising cost of housing. There's just more demand than there is supply. For the past year, the median home price within the city has exceeded $400,000. That's a really significant increase, even adjusted for inflation. Just 10 years ago, it was about half that, about $200,000. The city's median home price is here in blue, and you can see in this light blue right above, it's really keeping up with the median price within the county as well. We're seeing the same trend in rents as well. This data shows the average rent for market rate multifamily properties within the city. The blue line shows changes in average rent among Class A and B properties. So those are really the newest, most high quality units on the market. Rents among these properties have increased about 25% post-COVID and are generally affordable to households making over 80% AMI. So not necessarily that LMI household group. Rents among Class C properties, and these are older properties that maybe don't have renovations, have less amenities. Rents among these properties have not necessarily seen the same rent increase as the higher quality units. And that's likely because these properties have significant challenges with regards to quality and health and safety of these units. To add a little more color to that, the median year built for Class A and B properties is around 2004. Meanwhile, the median year built of Class C units is 1976. So even taking renovations into consideration. So, and this is something that we heard as well from stakeholders, that there is a share of the housing market, of the housing supply within the city that faces significant challenges with quality. Despite these large differences in quality between these two housing types, vacancy rates among both property types, both the Class A and B, as well as Class C, is around 3%. So even despite the challenges with quality, the vacancy rate is still a lot lower than we would expect in a compared to a market with abundant supply of housing. The last thing I wanted to talk about was supply. So I talked about this demand for 10,000 housing units. But there is significant development that's in the pipeline for Henderson County. Based off of the most recent data that we have, there's an estimated 5,700 housing units that are in the pipeline for the county as a whole. This table breaks down the type of housing, if it's affordable to LMI households or if it's market rate, and if it's for sale or for rent. By and large, most of the housing that's in the pipeline is market rate housing, geared more towards households making over 80% of the area median income. I wanted to show here, though, that within the city of Hendersonville, about 83% of the for rent or the rental units in the pipeline are 83% are within the city. I wanted to highlight some of these properties that are in the pipeline. Cantrell Hills, which I'm sure this group is familiar with, is a single family subdivision just north of the city. These units are starting at about $450,000 and are affordable to households earning about 130% AMI or $110,000. On the rental side, the Summit at Hendersonville, these units, the starting rent for these units are roughly affordable to households earning 80% AMI or around $65,000, depending on your household size. I want to talk, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the how these properties are performing. What we're seeing is that even though these units aren't necessarily affordable to LMI households, the vacancy rates among these new multifamily developments are strikingly low. So they lease up very quickly over a short amount of time, which we think indicates significant demand for both market rate and affordable housing. I'll pause there again before I talk about Hurricane Helene, but any reactions or questions about the housing supply section?
Is there a number about the disabled community in that? So I think there was like 825 people or folks that needed low to moderate income housing, but is there a way to extract the disabled from that number, or is that included in that number at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know the disabled community is counted like it's included within the data that we looked at. I don't have that on hand, but we do have access to that. So that's something that I could follow up with you all, having estimates on what percentage or what share of these households are living with disabilities.
That would be great.
Yep. Great. So, yep.
So, if you go back to the previous slide, is it okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay, sorry. So you said that like, the vacancy rate for those properties that aren't really very affordable, that it's at like 3%. So that means that there is a market for market rate rent. However, those places are only getting rented because there are no affordable places. So people that can't afford it are renting them. So it's not really that there's a demand for high priced rent. It's just that they have no other choice.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. That's a piece of what's happening, right? That those are the only units on the market, and so those are the units that become available on the market, I should say, and that those are the housing options. That being said, I think something that we heard from a lot of employers is that even folks who they hire who are in the higher income brackets, making maybe between $70,000 and $100,000. Even those folks are have a hard time finding housing within the city. So affordability, right, is a challenge that really affects LMI households, but households of all types really are face this challenge of finding housing because the vacancy rate is so low. So I think it's a both and situation in terms of, for LMI households, this is not a solution, but there are, this is a place with a number of jobs that are where job growth is really significant at all income levels. And even folks at the higher income levels, finding housing was identified as one of it was a challenge for households of all income brackets.
Alright, let's see what Helene did.
So, so I want to emphasize here, this is, this is very preliminary. Of course, we will be, it'll take us, probably years to really understand the full impact of Hurricane Helene. But I did want to just reserve some time to talking about what we know so far about how Helene impacted the housing market. I talked about before how, according to state estimates, about 126 housing units within all of Western North Carolina were damaged in some capacity by Hurricane Helene. So obviously a tremendous shock on the supply of housing and folks who are living in the area. More locally, as of October 21st, about 4,600 homeowners and 2,500 renters have been approved for FEMA individual assistance within zip codes that cover the city of Hendersonville. So we're looking at regionally significant impact and also within the city. I wanted to map out really where the city and parts of the county were exposed to flood hazards. Obviously, Helene had a number of different impacts on the housing stock, not just flooding, right? Damage from falling debris, from landslides, but I'm going to focus on flooding because that's where the most accurate data that we have comes from. This map here shows the census tracts within Henderson County and shows the median household income of those census tracts. The darker red, the median income is between $80,000 and $110,000, and then the brighter pink, the median household income is less than $40,000. What you can see is that most of those the lowest income neighborhoods within the county are overlap in some capacity with the city. And when we show the floods, or when we overlay the flood zone on that same map, we see that a lot of these same neighborhoods are exposed to flood hazards within the city of Hendersonville. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and talk about some specific ways that Helene impacted the city. This is Clear Creekside Drive. I'm sure you all have been talking about this neighborhood a lot over the past month. Single family neighborhood, I believe in just northeast of the city. An estimated 30 units were impacted by Helene. This neighborhood here, this is the neighborhood here with the 100 and 500 year flood zone overlaid in this blue color here. What made Helene so significant is just the scale of precipitation over a short amount of time. And what we saw was that flooding really surpassed what we had traditionally thought of as the traditional flood zone for the community. And based off of satellite imagery, news reports, social media postings, on average, flooding across Henderson County, exceeded roughly 30 meters past the traditional flood zone shown here, and that buffer is shown here in yellow. To kind of put this in perspective of the supply of housing in Hendersonville, homes in this neighborhood sell for between $300,000 and $350,000 and are affordable to households making between 60% and 80% of area median income. Taking the same approach of assessing how many housing units were exposed to Helene flooding, or were within that 30-meter buffer of the flood zone. This chart here shows the total number of households that are within that radius. Countywide, an estimated 1,700 single-family homes were exposed to Helene flooding, And it's broken out here by different areas. So the unincorporated county, the city, Mills River, Flat Rock, and Fletcher, and then also broken out by the price of the home or the tax assessed value of those homes. And what we see in Hendersonville is that the majority of homes that were impacted by the storm or were within that flood buffer were on the lower side of or the lower cost side, so they're more affordable to LMI households. Most of these homes were about had tax values of $350,000 or less. But it wasn't just single family homes that were impacted, of course. The city's multifamily properties were also impacted. This is another case study looking at Universal at Lakewood, one of the city's newest apartment buildings, just completed in 2022. Several dozen units within this apartment complex were damaged during the storm. And rents among rents in this development are affordable to renters making about 80% AMI. And at the time of the storm, the vacancy rate was less than 1%. So even some of the city's newest, most fully occupied housing developments were impacted in the storm as well. The last case study that I wanted to raise, I'm not sure if Connie is in the room this evening, but we spoke with Connie from the Henderson Housing Authority, and the Housing Authority was also impacted by the storm. About 44 housing units within Lincoln Circle and Robinson Terrace were taken offline by Hurricane Helene, which makes up approximately 12% of the Housing Authority stock within the city. So what we saw was that the storm really impacted housing stock across a wide range of affordability levels. And then the last thing I want to talk about with regards to supply and Hurricane Helene was the role and importance of mobile home parks, both within the city and the county. Mobile homes make up about 15% of the county's housing stock, and mobile homes came up very frequently during our stakeholder conversations as a really vital source of affordable housing for folks, but really a housing type that really struggled with issues around quality and overcrowding. Many of these mobile home parks were also within that 30-meter buffer of the flood zone. This is just an example of one within the city as well. So I'll go back just to kind of rehash some of the things that we talked about the demand for housing over the next 5 years within Henderson County, addressing both current and future demand. Henderson County needs about 10,000 units over the next 5 years. And again, within the city, there's about 2,000 of those units are needed for low to moderate income households. Housing supply was significantly constrained even before Helene. Supply has outpaced demand by about 2 to 1, and the vacancy rate is below 2%. Talked about those different household types who are in need of housing within the city, who live in either unaffordable or low quality housing. And then, revisiting Helene and the significant impact that had both on supply of housing and displacement of folks living within the community. So I'll pause there. I reserved a little bit of time at the end for discussion about anything that we've heard. Or is anything surprising or unexpected that you heard, or are there things that we're missing? Do these findings reflect what you've seen? And has the hurricane really impacted, how you think about housing priorities over the past month? So I'll pause here for any comments, questions, or reflections.
Great, Lindsay Simpson. The 10,000 units that we're projecting that we need, that doesn't include the ones that are in the pipeline, right?
That's right. Yep. Thanks for clarifying that. Yep. So that doesn't include, so there right now there's 5,700 in the pipeline and 10,000 needed. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm wondering, thinking back to like the Bowen study, how does the number we're projecting now compared to the number that they were projecting when they did that? 'Cause that was 2021?
2019.
Was it 2019?
That was a long time ago.
Oh my God.
Pre-COVID, pre-Helene, yeah.
It just makes me, I'm just curious, like, what the difference is, because I feel like in the Bowen study, it was half of that.
2,500 units total.
Right, so that's like a quarter of what we're projecting now. Which that's a huge jump. So I find that very surprising.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at kind of how they, the methodology behind that and how that compares. Uh, but yeah, if it's before, I think what we see in the data and what we heard was that there was significant change. Like COVID was a big event, right? In terms of it was a big turning point, both in migration in terms of people like moving to this region. I mean, we see this in a lot of Western North Carolina communities, but as well as, what are the what's going on with the vacancy rate. So there's significant household formation during COVID, and that a lot of people who previously were living with roommates now live by themselves. And I think that's one of the things that might drive demand for housing. But that's something that I would have to dig into a little bit more, and we could do that. And Sarah, I don't know if you had.
And I think it's also important to remember that this is data. Data is flawed, depending on the moment in time in which you're looking at it. It is important to compare and to look back and to see where you were at then. But there's always going to be a little bit of a, margin of error in how we look at it and think about it. So that point. And then I would also say, the 10,000, was the Bowen report countywide, Frank, as well?
I'm not sure if the Bowen report was countywide.
It was.
It was, okay, yep.
This is more of an FYI for the group. We applied, HUD released voucher waivers for the hurricane, and so we applied for those. They approved those, our board approved those last week. And so, there's several waivers, but we have about approximately 500 voucher recipients here in Henderson County that's receiving rental assistance. And so what we've done is one of the waivers allows us to extend our voucher search term from 120 days to, I guess whatever time we deem appropriate, given the situation. And so we're looking at 3 to 4 months of a voucher extension. Okay, so that's just putting that out there for anybody in the community who's, if you run across anyone, let them know that we're looking at extending those times. As obviously inventory was compromised, we can see. So, it was difficult before folks to find units, and obviously now they'll need additional time. And so so that's just an FYI to the group. Okay?
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, and I think the number that I had heard too a couple years ago during the Duke Leadership Forum was 52% of voucher recipients were elderly or disabled. And so that's why I was kind of wondering, like, where that number,
Yes.
falls. That tells us a lot of information about, like,
That's great.
So one thing too, we work, the city and the county, I feel like work diligently in recruiting high quality, good paying jobs in the industrial and manufacturing world, which we have kind of a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of control over, but we do have like a pretty good impact on that subsect of the workforce. What we don't have a huge impact on is the medical community, and so much of that is driven by federal reimbursements from Medicare and Medicaid, which continue to drop. I mean, those fee schedules and reimbursements drop every year. I mean, physicians across the board, myself included, and hospitals and facilities are seeing less reimbursement from federal agencies, which then impacts the management of how much they can pay staff and how they can recruit and retain staff. So we have people in the medical community, nurses, doctors included, going to Greenville because they can make like $30,000 to $50,000 more a year than Henderson County or Western North Carolina. And like those regional fee schedules are set by the government, by the federal government. And so, I mean, we talk about affordable housing and like looking at housing costs, but also if we have higher wages, then that also helps to address housing costs. And so, I don't know if like the league, if you guys lobby at all for, you know, rate reimbursements for physicians and, you know, facilities, nursing homes, like, you know, assisted skilled care facilities. We have a lot of those in this area. And so that helps wages, which then helps, you know, balance out the housing community. And so that's just a comment. I don't know if that's something we could make as part of this group, is just advocating for higher wages for our medical employment across the board, because it's definitely a big issue here.
I think it's the same thing with the school system.
Yeah.
Well, any other big things that jumped out at anyone? I mean, I think Hurricane Helene has just amplified the issues that we were having before. I was kind of surprised to see that so many of the mobile home parks were so close to the flood areas. And also, I think the fact that a majority of the city is at 80 or 50% AMI or lower is also quite surprising.
The mobile homes, I think we in a lot of communities we work in Western North Carolina and Eastern North Carolina, we see that a lot, that mobile home parks are usually the ones who are most exposed to, often most exposed to flood hazards. So, and just this, you know, the scale of that, how much of the housing stock are under mobile homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was a lot of information. Is it possible for us to get a copy of this presentation? So I
Absolutely.
was trying to take notes and then I realized it'd be a lot easier if I just got
But better
this.
to just, yeah, happy to follow up with the PDF of all this information so you all can have it.
Frank, I was gonna ask, are we gonna get narratives to go with these to, you know, like in the form of a report for the needs assessment?
So a report was not part of our scope. We're pretty report agnostic. That being said, I'll try to I'll make sure that the slides can kind of live on their own, if that makes sense. So, you know, make sure that it's all that information is there for you.
It seems like every time there's a question, there's background knowledge that you gain through your interviews and things like that. And, you know, I'm not quite sure the best way for us to tap into that.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And so, okay.
We have those places that you interviewed. Was it mostly manufacturers? Was it hospitals? Did we
Looks
get
like it was
into
kind of all over.
It was
the
everything.
It was, yeah. Sorry, I'm going
Hospitality
to go
to
way back to the
restaurants,
beginning.
hotels?
Sorry.
Frank, I'm gonna sign you up for something. I'm wondering,
Okay.
if just with this, it makes sense to include like a brief memo where you just synthesize what you heard.
Yeah, I could do that.
And have like the case from it, and it's just a 2-pager, but you attach it to the presentation and it's just a guide for it.
Yeah.
So it does not look like there was a lot of
We didn't-
tourism on.
Yeah, we didn't really look at the whole Henderson County employer base to see, because you've got a hospitality industry that's a lower base as a whole, and you have those in restaurants that are living on tips alone. I mean, you have those employers that I don't see represented there, and they're the ones that use the HUD vouchers. They're the ones that need those kind of housing. They're the ones that are trying to make it paycheck to paycheck. And trying to find housing, and those kind of salaries are not what they make.
Right.
And that's kind of where, and again, maybe it's off base in affordable housing, but I don't feel like that.
Well, I think the questions that he asked me, and he had great questions with the housing authority, because I house a lot of those residents, those workers that you're speaking of, but I also have workers from those places also.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to emphasize is that the city staff really gave us an extensive list that I think included some of those groups as well. And then we were in the middle of engagement right when the hurricane hit, and so this was and we know that that you all are in the city are working on your own listening sessions that we know will be incorporated into a lot of this information.
But you do raise a good point, and there are other sources of information that we can look to and tap into to kind of break that out, like the Employment Security Commission has a lot on the type of workers that we have, how much are in the service industry. So you raise a good point that we can incorporate into our report.
Yeah.
When we talk about the needs. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a lot of work.
Thank you.
Interrupted by a hurricane that made more work. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you all.
Next up is a general housing update. It's ambiguous on who is giving us this general housing update.
We're gonna tag team it. So
Okay.
just really quickly, so we didn't meet in October, so I think our schedule is gonna be shifted 1 or 2 months, as far as towards adoption of a plan. Next month, I do have on, supposed to have been for this month, but I shifted it. Robert and forget the lady's name, that's your comptroller, your finance person. Yes, had agreed to do a presentation on WNC Source and Section 8 housing and some data that they have and what they see. And so I don't know if you still are on target to be able to do that in December now. And then as well as Connie, I had you on for the same meeting to talk about the housing authority and some of your data and basically from the ground up, what y'all do. Like when you said Section 8 housing waivers, I don't know what that means. And so and same for you, what it takes to qualify and how your programs work. If you could educate us on that, that would be awesome, is what I have for December. And then in January, we're talking about utilities. The utilities director wanted to come and talk about how we can use utilities to help impact affordable housing. And then a realtor data presentation. I believe Steve Dozier maybe was gonna come and talk to us about that, and now it'll be January instead of December. And then Fountain Works, who we engaged to help collect community input, is also on schedule to give us a presentation. So that'll be our next 2 meetings. And speaking of Fountain Works, Allison agreed to give us an update on the listening sessions.
Yeah, so pre-Helene's arrival, we held 2 very successful input meetings. Councilmember Hensley hosted one at Trailside, excuse me, and Councilmember Miller held one at the Veteran Services Building. Due to the hurricane, we rescheduled the last 3 meetings. And there are flyers over there. Most of you already know about these, but 2 of them are tomorrow. Mayor Pro Tem Simpson will be hosting the one aimed at nonprofits and hearing that input. And that'll be at 2 p.m. at Mountain View Church, which is on Duncan Hill Road. And then in the evening, we will move across town to Green Meadows Community at Union Grove, and Councilmember Lawrence will host that one at 6 p.m. Then we take a brief break, and then December 3rd is our final meeting that we're very excited with the help of El Centro and Nancy Diaz, as well as True Ridge. That will be a bilingual meeting held on December 3rd at 6 p.m. at Immaculate Conception Church. So those are the input sessions that are still remaining. In addition to that, we have an online survey that has been available and we will keep open until December 8th. We've had, it says around 200 participants, but when you actually look down to see who has been answering questions, we probably had around 120 respondents on the online survey. We're hoping to gain more before the time we close it. So that's just a great avenue if people aren't able to join us in person. The next 3 meetings will also be offering a raffle to attendees. If they are able to join us, they'll be able to put their name in for a $50 Ingles gift card drawing, which we're hoping can help offset some costs depending on the number. We'll have at least 12 cards available at each meeting with the potential for a few more to give away. So any questions about the community listening sessions? Right, the agenda will be similar to the first two, but we've made a few adjustments and definitely some logistics adjustments with the bilingual meeting too, to try to make sure we're prepared to gather input in both languages there.
I think it'd be really great to get more people to fill out the survey. So if anybody has any groups of people that they can send the survey link out to, I think that would be helpful. Cause 120 people is not enough, not enough. I think the more people we can get it out to, the better. Is the survey also in Spanish?
Yes, if you go to the website, which is hendersonville.nc.gov/housing plan, or there's a button on the homepage. When you get to that webpage, there's a button for the English version of the survey and a button for the Spanish version. We've got some radio ads running and a few things like that, but yes, I can send to this group. I think I've sent it before, but I can send it out again. That has some of the marketing materials and a link to the survey in case you're able to put that in your own newsletters or share with your residents or clients.
Yeah. And then I'm also wondering, for the survey, could we do the Ingles gift card drawing thing for that?
I've held back 2 gift cards that we could potentially do towards that.
Just to have a little carrot to get people to fill the survey out.
I have an additional 2 that haven't been assigned to a particular meeting. So yeah.
It's worth a shot. You could even, like, if they're both $50, then you could be like, fill out the survey and get a chance to win $100 in those gift cards. It's like, cause that really sounds good, right? That'd be worth the few minutes it takes to
Takes
fill
to
out
do
the
it.
survey.
We can make that happen.
All right, thank you. What's next?
I think that's it.
Was it for our update?
I think that's it for our update, yes.
Okay.
I do want to thank all the online listeners. I think we had a really good.
Yes, thank you to everybody online for joining us. Double digits, y'all. That's pretty good. And they're not even all staff people. So that's very exciting. Make sure you're sharing the survey with folks. Make sure we're sharing the last listening sessions with everybody. And then we'll review our 2025 calendar at our next meeting. If there's nothing else, then I think we could be adjourned. We're here. Here, here. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Because that's next week.